Workers who are 60-70% have been looked upon as adversaries to the owners of the company. If the workers became part of the whole production team of the company, then there would be a huge increase in the productivity and efficiency. Management then worked out a system by which they flipped the whole thing. And instead of workers and the unions being opponents, actually became partners with the management in the company.
There are companies who think that having an attendance of 85% is good. Now, I think Maruti is touching 90 plus.
We are about 97.
97% attendance. I think unheard of.
Our people actually work for the full 8 hours of the shift, minus 15 minutes, which is the tea break. So 7 hours 45 minutes actual working time. Now if you compare 7 hours 45 with let's say 6 hours, that's a good 20% improvement in production.
How do I make this happen?
So the biggest change which is required is in
Hello everyone. India wants to be a developed nation by the year 2047. Now, one of the sectors that really need to fire up is manufacturing. From the current levels of 16%, it has to go up to as high as 25%. Now, the common narrative has been that there are a lot of things that the government needs to do. And for the last 5 years, government is doing a lot of things. But today, we're going to discuss a counterpoint. What should individual organizations do to meet these kind of numbers? Now, that is in the realm of management. To discuss this counterpoint, we have with us Mr. R.C. Bhargava, Chairman Maruti Suzuki, and who has seen the revolution, the auto revolution happening in the country from being almost nothing in the 80s to what it is today. In his latest book, Impossible to Possible, while he is narrating the story of Maruti, he is also indirectly telling us the story of the need to change the management practices. His view is we need to lean towards the Eastern philosophy, more away from the Western philosophy. Welcome, Mr. Bhargava, to this counterpoint. So my first question, Mr. Bhargava, is why there is a need for change? The Western philosophy of management is well researched, well documented, and on the face of it, it looks like the best thing to do. And why should we change, and particularly in manufacturing?
Well, let me put it to you this way, Satya. The Western management practices developed in a number of countries, but at a time when there was very little competition, either within the country or between countries. And it's more or less all protected markets. There was little international trade. There was no bilateral or multilateral arrangements for regulating international trade. And the system worked well because essentially competition requires you to maximize your efficiency, to maximize your output with minimum inputs. There was no compulsion to do that. Mm-hmm. The same thing was true of India for a long time because we were a very closed market. And our policy was guided towards self-sufficiency and making ourselves independent of external trade. Mm. All that has changed. And it is obvious now that not only do we have to compete strongly with people within the country, but if we are going to get our manufacturing growth changing from 14, 15, 16% to 25%, international trade has to play a major part, which means competition. Because all countries in the world today are doing their best to grow their manufacturing industry and to get as large a share of the global market as possible, which means more and more competition. All the evidence of the last 40 years, 50 years, from when competition has developed, shows that the Western manufacturing practices have failed to be successful when pitted against what was developed in Japan and what has been happening in the more authoritarian kind of regimes in the East. And the need for change, therefore, arises that if India is to grow the rate of its manufacturing growth and get into double figures and get into 14-15% annual increases, it has to become far more competitive. The question, therefore, is that can we become competitive with the existing system? There, my answer is that why did Japan change and develop a new manufacturing system? Because after the war, they realized that all the other inputs of manufacturing, whether it was raw materials or machines and things, were more or less at the same cost as anybody else would get. The only thing which was different and which could make a difference to manufacturing in Japan compared to other countries was their human resources. Could they maximize the output from the human beings so that they could actually overcome all their other disadvantages of not having raw materials and energy and still become more competitive? And the Japanese management system, as it evolved, was essentially based on this need for maximizing the output using human resources and getting maximum efficiency in the whole system thereby.
Yeah. That's a very interesting thought. And the Western philosophy would claim that, maximizing profit is also what they tend to do. So I think let's get into specifics of what are the changes that you are highlighting. Maybe we start with the workers themselves. And I think you have a very strong view of how the workers needs to be managed in a very different way.
Yes, I think it comes down to that ultimately because in any manufacturing company, normally about 60 to 70% of total employees are workers. And the rest are the supervisors and the young managers and the senior management. The Western management practices have always been managed in a way, if I may put it, where the workers who are 60-70% have been looked upon as adversaries to the owners of the company and the management. And the total human resources in a company are actually divided into two in terms of management and workers. And workers then form unions because they need more bargaining strength. Now, what are the implications of this? We have seen that this system firstly leads frequently, not so much now, but it used to lead frequently to industrial relations problems. We've had a lot of it in our history. Strikes, lockouts, sit-downs, gheeraos, even violence. Now, all of that ultimately takes a toll of the working efficiency of the company. Output comes down, costs go up, the customers are unhappy because there is disruption of supplies, all that kind of thing happens. That's one part of it. The second part of it is that the workers themselves do not feel that they are part of the company. They feel that they have to work for their 8 hours a day, for which they are paid a certain salary which they have negotiated. And as long as they keep doing what they have to do or what they are told to do over those 8 hours, they are fine. They do not look upon it as part of their responsibility to see how to do their work more efficiently or get more output out of these 8 hours. In fact, if you remember, a lot of wage negotiations centered around what should be the hourly production or the daily production.
Yeah.
The workers wanted to reduce it, the management wanted to increase it.
It is still on in many companies.
Still happening.
Yeah.
So there's no common objective of growing the company. So the third thing is, therefore, that workers need to be policed in a sense. that they come in time, that they work when they're supposed to work, they don't go off and take some
Yeah.
cigarette time or something
Yeah.
else.
The lunch breaks becoming much bigger than intended. Yeah.
Fourthly, there is no need for the workers to at all bother that if they do work, are they doing it as well as it should be done so that defects and quality problems are minimized, if not eliminated. They don't do that because they just have to do something. There's always a department of inspection, a department of quality control, and those are the guys who do that work. So the worker is not responsible for that either, all of which adds to the cost of manufacturing.
Yeah.
The workers take a lot of leave, which is allowed under the law, and the attendance levels in companies are what? 85%, 87%, something like that.
Yeah.
Within the company itself, the working hours, actual productive working hours, instead of being the full 7.5 hours in a shift, rarely go beyond 6.5 hours or so.
Yeah.
Because something breaks down or some tool is missing or some supply is not there. And the workers are not interested in taking the initiative and getting that deficiency remedied.
Yeah.
So all of that leads to lower output.
Yeah.
Now the Japanese realized that, I'm talking of 1950 now, that if all these deficiencies could be overcome, and if the workers became part of the whole production team of the company and was actually convinced that being part of the company would be of benefit to them, then there would be a huge increase in the productivity and efficiency of what was being done in the company. And that seemed to the Japanese to be the only way in which they could overcome their other resource and energy deficiencies. And that's where the management then worked out a system by which they flipped the whole thing. And instead of workers and the unions being opponents, actually became partners of the management in the company.
Yeah.
When we started Maruti, we were in somewhat of a similar situation. Everyone everywhere, including in Japan and the rest of the automobile industry, gave Maruti no chance of success. It was supposed to be a political project. Cars were a taboo project in the socialist system. Market was 35, 40,000 cars a year. Where was 100,000 cars going to be sold? And that too produced by a public sector company. So we had really no way that if we continued with business as usual and did what everybody else was doing, we would have, I think, zero chance of success. And that's where Mr. Suzuki and Mr. Krishnamurti and I felt that we had to do something different. And the different, obviously, was what was before us in Japan, where Japan had turned around a seemingly hopeless situation into a highly winning situation by creating this total partnership in the company. And that's what we did in Maruti. And surprisingly, as you know, we succeeded in changing the attitudes of the workers, and they became partners with us. And you've seen the result of where Maruti, instead of being a failure, has become one of the greatest wealth creators in the country.
Yeah. I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. When you have 70% of your employees not using their brain and they're just using their muscle, then you're losing out on a lot of opportunities for wealth creation. Now the point is, if I look at various promoters, is they'd always see that, how do I make this happen? This is something I also want. So how do we change the environment? Because as you rightly pointed out, in vast majority of organizations, manufacturing organizations, the relationship is very adversarial. It is very transactional. It is like I sign a contract. So there are companies who face issues of expansion of the lunch breaks, not getting adequate time, and always the workers have an excuse, the management have an excuse, and it's always It's not a partnership, right?
It
What
is,
should be done? And what is lacking? Let's put it this way. What is really lacking in the management approach that prevents us from getting this benefit?
see, why did Japan do what they did and why did Maruti do what it did? Both of us did what we did because we were faced with a situation that if we did not change, we would go under. Now, most of Indian industry and most of the promoters and the capitalists don't feel that they are in any risk of going under. None of them are losing their businesses. Competition still is not that strong. And now you're seeing some pushback from the government, but when FTAs and others was proposed, there was a great objection from industry that no, don't reduce duties because it would hurt us. So Indian industry has always wanted a certain element of protection. With that element of protection, they have been in a reasonable comfort zone so that they didn't feel threatened at all. Even now, I don't think they will really be threatened. But the need for change is not really because I think businesses are going to feel the threat of somebody coming and wiping them out because they have a much more efficient company, because it's not happened. It's not likely to happen.
Yeah.
It did happen to an extent in the car industry, and Hindustan Motors and Premiers went under. But otherwise, it's not really happening. Why should they do it? The only reason today why I'm saying we need to do it is what you started by saying, that we have a national goal of becoming a developed country by 2047. The present government and the present Prime Minister have clearly shown that they understand the issues relating to competitive manufacturing and the importance of manufacturing far, far better than any government has done in the past. A lot of reforms have happened, a lot of changes have happened. Government is receptive to hearing how to make it easier to do business. So government is fully behind industry, I think for the first time in our lives, in trying to promote manufacturing, because it wants manufacturing to become a much bigger contributor to the national development targets. Industry has to realize or think whether they want to play that role or not.
Yeah. I think a lot of promoters would say, at least quite a few that I know would say, I want to do it now. Tell me what changes I should do in the way I deal with workers in general, what changes I need to do so that I make them engaged. Because the key thing is they're not as engaged as, let's say, what you have in Maruti.
Sure.
And I read your book, and you talk about a lot of things about creating an egalitarian workspace. So can you talk about it? That how do I make this transition? Suppose somebody says, okay, I need to make the change because there is a value gain in terms of productivity. All those things are there on the table. Even if there is, let's say, not a pressure of competition, but there is money to be made, as you have highlighted in your book. So can you tell me, to the promoters who are saying, okay, hey guys, I'm willing to make a change. Tell me, what is the big change that I need to do with my workers?
I think the first change is the promoter must genuinely accept that if workers become part of his team, there's a very substantial amount of value which will be added to the company. Not only because you will get the brains of the 60% people, but because of all the negative costs which are associated with policing an adversarial chunk of people.
The layer of supervision and
all of
auditing
that,
and
attendance and this and that. So many things keep happening.
There are so many indirect costs. Like, for example, in pharma industry, so there's a lot of thing about data integrity. And so the workers do a lot of data entry. So if you're not engaged, it impacts on the
Sure.
data itself,
But the
and that's a cost.
quality is hugely impacted
Yeah,
if the person actually doing the job
yeah,
is not concerned about what he's doing. So I think the promoter has to recognize that there's a huge amount of value to be added. Now, he has to then make up his mind that it actually wants this value add, and that is his first objective. I'm saying this, Satya, because a lot of promoters are quite happy with the amount of money which they are making from their companies today. They lead a life which is comparable to the lives of industrialists in the most developed countries. So there is no feeling that they are being deprived of something which they could get if they had more growth of the company. So there has to be a different mindset, if I may say, or a change in what they want in life.
yeah,
If they want that instead of just making money and leading a life of opulence and luxury, they actually want to become known as one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the globe and India, contribute to the national wealth, become recognized for what they are doing. That's a different kind of approach. So the biggest change which is required is in what is the objective of the entrepreneur. What does he really want in life? Once that happens, then the question which you asked is, how does he go about it?
yeah,
The answer is actually not so difficult. I think in all our experience, whether your, mine, or anybody else's, we've seen that unless another person is convinced that what you're asking him to do is in his interest, he will never do it willingly. He may do it because he wants to keep his job, he wants to get his salary, he wants to keep on your right side, all of that. But that involvement in the job will only come if he finds that doing what he's being suggested he should do will actually benefit him. Now, if you think a little bit about workers and industry, the question I have is, what creates security of employment for a worker? Obviously, the only security of employment of a worker is not the law. It's the company remaining a going organization, which means the company must be competitive, must be profitable, must be able to continue to work in the marketplace, without getting run over by other companies. So a worker, if he wants to protect his job in the long term, has a personal interest in his company being competitive. In India, if you get thrown out of a job in a company, let's say in Haryana, where do you go? It's not easy for these guys who still have roots in their villages to pack up and go and settle down in some village in Maharashtra. Can't happen here.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it. Second part is that if workers over their career are going to get improvements in their remuneration, in their facilities, let's say in their schooling, in their housing and things, where are the resources from that going to come? The answer is again obvious, that it has to come from the surpluses generated by the company. It cannot come from anywhere else. The days when government used to take over private companies and protect jobs of people or give housing and other things to workers irrespective of whether the company was making a loss or making a profit are gone. It's no longer possible to do that. So the worker has to be dependent on the company's ability to generate surpluses to be able to have any chance of improving his future. Now, having said this, then it becomes quite obvious that actually the health of the company and the progress of the company is of vital interest to the worker. It's not so difficult to convince the worker of this. But convincing him of this is not adequate. I may believe that that my resources all come from the company. But if the company keeps generating all these profits and not sharing anything with me, then I'll lose my motivation pretty soon. Why am I doing it? So then the promoter has to realize that if the worker is going to become a part of the company, all his policies and actions of the promoter and the management have to be such as would firstly convince the worker that the management is all serious about growing the company and increasing its profitability and resources. And so all your actions must be first, company first.
Yeah.
Secondly, that when the company starts increasing its output and profits and things growing, part of the growth benefits will be shared with the workers. Because I will do things to improve the company. If some of that benefit comes to me, I have, of course, to explain to the worker that all the profits can't be given to them. I have to explain to them how profits are made, where all profits are required to be allocated and why. And
it's like opening up the
you have
entire P&L and the way you are
they have
managing
to
the
be
numbers.
fully in the picture of what are actually management options and compulsions. There's no reason, because if he is a partner in your company, he must also know why you are doing what you're doing.
So
I can't be a partner with you, Satya.
Yeah.
If you keep me in the dark, that's a black box how I manage the company, you don't need to know anything. Then how will I know what you're doing?
No, that's a big change. You are saying a complete transparency about where the company is going, what are the challenges, how you're managing your P&L. That's a big change for many companies. What you highlighted is that there has to be a wealth sharing, a win-win, where the company's workers see that as the company grows, I also grow
with the company.
Now, a lot of companies have these bonuses like attendance bonus, productivity bonus. But what I see a difference between them and what you're suggesting is there's like a kind of upper cap there. It's like, okay, your attendance is, let's say, at a high 90s, you get this kind of a bonus that's fixed. That's not really linked to the company making money. So they don't. So what you're highlighting is not just having another bonus program linked to some kind of a very local parameter. You're highlighting that let's create wealth as the company is doing more and more. You start to gain more and more, and make it very transparent. I think you wrote about interestingly in Maruti at one point of time, you had this that if the workers cross the 25 cars per person dispatched, end-to-end dispatch, they start to make more. And it is very interesting for the audience to know that at one point of time, you wrote in the book that they made more than their basic salary. And how many...
This productivity-linked scheme, originally when we suggested it to government, they wouldn't accept it. They said, no, the total amount of bonus which can be given to a worker is limited, I think, to 24% or something, some figure, I may be wrong in that. And we got stuck. Then they came up with this memo of understanding, MOUs with the public sector companies. In that memo, we proposed that we want to have a company-wide productivity-linked bonus scheme.
Without upper cap.
Wait.
Okay.
What we said was that the project report which you approved and which Suzuki prepared, said that maximum output in the company would be 100,000 cars with 4,000 workers, 4,000 employees, so 25 cars. We are proposing that if our output goes beyond 25 per worker, then 75% of the additional labor savings, not first 25 is excluded, that's part of your 25%, 75% of that will be shared by all the employees. It was not any section wise or product wise, it's all company wise because he was emphasizing teamwork. Now, government approved this. Probably they thought
This will not happen.
that in no public sector company has output really ever crossed 100%. So even if these guys cross 100%, 25 may go to 28 or 29 or 30, it's okay. They didn't realize that this 25 would go to 75 and more. But ultimately, Satya, the answer is profit sharing.
Yes. That's the big deal. Yeah.
The ultimate goal should be
Yeah.
that workers should participate in the profit sharing of the company.
Yeah.
In a sense, they should be treated like shareholders.
Yeah.
And Japan does that, by the way. They don't have all these bonus schemes and things. So, but here we had to do this because initially we did profit sharing. It would become very difficult for workers to understand what we were doing. Whereas this output thing they understood very clearly.
Yeah.
And hours per work hour also they understand clearly. But ultimately, the thing should move to profit sharing.
Profit sharing.
Along with this, then you also to keep giving some benefits to workers. Like I've written in that book about housing and school, and we have a benevolent fund for their employees and things like that. Because there's enough money available if
So you're
you're
saying
doing it.
improve their quality of life in general. So interestingly, you also have talked about basic hygiene factors of creating an egalitarian workspace. Things like they don't feel that there is a caste system existing in the company. How do I take all that away? And so they feel that we are equals as a human, and that's a very important part of feeling engaged. That I'm as a human being, I'm same as you. And
See, if you are wanting to create a team, partnership, trust with each other, can you do that if you treat the guy ki, look, you are something not equal to me in terms of being human beings, that my food needs are better, my clothing needs are better. Can I do that with you? If you look at any team anywhere, is there a differentiation in the team uniform? The captain of the team, it may be Virat Kohli, but Virat Kohli doesn't get anything special on the field. He's like anybody else. He's treated like anybody else. You may be an outstanding performer, but so what? You're still part of the team. The rewards which you get as a team come to you as a team.
so while the match is on, everybody is equal. So while you come to the workspace, ensure that everybody feels equal, and then that is a lot of hygiene factors which should be corrected for
That's where
organizations.
when you're talking of what the management has to do. The attitude of many of the promoters in this respect will have to change. I don't see some of the older time management leaders of the promoters, big promoters, mixing and eating with the workers. We used to eat sitting on the same table as the workers, eating the same food in the same utensils as the workers were eating. Now, that's something which you have to do. It's your contribution towards growing the company.
Yeah.
Because remember, as the promoter or the manager of the company, you don't expect to get 100% growth in your profit by doing nothing. You also have to contribute in some way to the whole exercise of winning over workers.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that the Maruti way is the only way. It's certainly not the only way. I would say that under the circumstances of each factory, where it is located, what the people are, the promoter and his top management need to find policies and ways of doing things which will actually convince the workers and keep them convinced that management A is only devoted to the growth of the company and not themselves. B, the management is sincere in its saying that we will be beneficiaries of the growth of the company. And how to make people convinced of this, that's the task of a management.
Yeah.
They can be, as you've seen, management has many ways of doing things. Even in today's Western style of management, Satya, it's not that all are managed in the same way.
Yeah.
In many companies, the owner goes around the shop floor. He knows a large number of workers by their first name. Mr. Keshav Mahindra used to do that. He knew most of the people there on the shop floor. So it creates a different feeling amongst them.
Yeah.
So, but each company has to work out.
Find out there.
But provided he has that object, that I have to bring the workers to feel that they are part of the company.
Yeah. I think to make the communication sharper to many of these promoters, there is money on the table. I remember you talking about how in Maruti you wanted to increase the output of the bottleneck machine, which is the paint shop. And you could actually get workers to come one shift before and then to set up that paint line.
Yeah, a few hours, they came an hour or so before, fired up the furnace.
And then also, leave, give that
a little bit later.
Later. Now, this is very difficult for many companies, by the way. What we have seen is to get them to increase the output of the bottling machine.
They will do it if they see that it's a benefit to them.
Yeah, yeah.
There the workers saw that if we did this, our output per head will increase.
Yeah.
So we'll get more money.
Absolutely.
Done.
In fact, just to quickly do a maths, in terms of the number that could be on the table. So I just quickly did a maths. And if you look at a company which is like 500 crores, right? And assuming a gross contribution of 40%. So let's say 200 crores is the gross contribution. And let's take the operating expense as about 150 crores. So you make, let's say, 50 crores of profit. Now, suppose on the bottleneck machine, by getting highly engaged workers, they are able to increase the output by 20%, assuming that entire output is sold throughout the year as well. You're getting 100 crores plus additional top line. And that 40% of that, which is 40 crores, goes straight to your bottom line. So you're jumping your profits from 50 crores to...
more will go.
Yeah.
Because fixed costs
has already been taken care
of.
So that's a dramatic jump that from 50 crores...
That's what happened to Maruti.
Yeah. And so you're jumping...
For years, Satya,
yeah,
our capacity of the unit was 100,000 cars a year.
Yeah.
We were constantly doing about 140,000. Steadily.
Yeah.
So for years and years, because we couldn't expand capacity.
So you're getting that additional output for the overheads, which
for
has already been kind
no
of...
investment.
Yeah.
For there were no overheads.
That's free money into your bottom line. And if I just take, let's assume that 7% of 500 goes into your worker's salary. So that's about 35 crores. And you just increase that by 10%, right? Or let's say even 20%. It's just 7 crores. What you're getting is close to 40 crores additional. What you're giving out is something that they are very delighted. So here, it is not just a moral thing that you are preaching.
There's
here.
No moral here.
Yeah, it is actually hardcore money on the table.
Money for everyone.
For everyone. Everyone on the table. And that's really the big deal that, hey guys, if you are struggling with workers not giving you the full touch
just
time.
Just calculate over a period of years
Yeah.
how much is lost
Yeah.
in ensuring compliance of workers with the requirements of punctuality and working time and
Yeah.
all of that.
In fact, the companies which are at there are companies who think that having an attendance of 85% is good. Now I think Maruti is touching 90 plus.
We are about 97 or so.
97% attendance. I think unheard of in many industries that we have seen. Uh, 90s is like a very big thing that they have achieved. But to have attendance of
95 was the minimum target which was set in 1982,
yeah,
that we have to get to minimum of 95. It took us 2, 3, 4 years to get there. We got there.
so
We had to give various incentives and various ways of motivating workers. And see, partly also, Satya, like as I said, policies and action. Maruti has a system where we have 2 6-monthly shutdowns for preventive maintenance. Now, most factories in India do not have a preventive maintenance shutdown. The advantage of a preventive maintenance shutdown, firstly, at that time, all the workers can go on leave. They need not come. Only the maintenance people have to come. So, not taking leave for this 6-month period, they can plan their outing with their families or whatever they have to do. In that,
while you're taking care of the machines as well. So it's like a
no, the work, this maintenance staff is different from the
yeah. I'm
production
saying that the action of the maintenance, the machines are becoming healthier, and
So then we don't have breakdowns during the
yeah.
year.
So it's like
our
a double whammy. Yeah,
productivity is far higher,
yeah.
and we lose nothing. We actually gain.
So for a company which is, let's say, I'm just trying to make a economic case for doing all the things that you're talking about for the workers. A company which is at a 97% attendance on a day-to-day basis versus a company which is at 90%, there is a lot of value loss.
Look
In
at
terms of
the improvement in productivity.
improve in productivity, the backlogs that get suddenly created. You planned for 10 and 3 landed up.
Against even 90, if I have 97, I have
Yeah.
got 8% improvement in productivity.
Absolutely.
Again, working hours.
Yeah.
Our people actually work for the full 8 hours of the shift, minus 15 minutes, which is a tea break. So 7 hours, 45 minutes actual working time. Now, if you compare 7 hours 45 with, let's say, 6 hours, 1 hour 45 minutes every day against 6
Additional
hours.
additional production under the table.
That's a good 20%
Absolutely.
improvement.
So
in production.
that's a huge amount of money on the table,
Yeah.
and the company gains a lot. The profitability improves
All of which
dramatically.
will happen if the
Yeah.
worker feels
Engaged.
that he's. So if I make ultimately, let's say, 100 crores extra profit,
Yeah.
what is the problem in giving 5 or 6 or 7 crores out of
To
that
the-
to the
yeah,
workers?
yeah.
But that was all 100 extra.
Yeah. I think a lot of companies today will struggle if they try to enforce the strictness of the lunch break times, the strictness of starting work on time. They would have a strike. And I know of companies which tried to, the promoter went around, saw some company, other company, and they say they are working, close to so many hours in a day, which is close to 7.5 hours. So why can't we do that? So it has to be mandated. So when you go for a mandate, you would land with the trouble with the union. But what you're highlighting is, don't try to solve the problem that way. You got to solve the problem by making the workers engaged so that they do it on their own. You don't have to police it and make it happen.
One of the beliefs which I've developed over all these years, first in government and then in industry, is that most rules and regulations, if they are just mandated, are very difficult to enforce. If you give an economic incentive for people to follow that, the compliance levels are very high.
Very high.
So wherever it is possible, make the system one where you can give a economic incentive for people
Yeah.
to follow that rule.
So in a way, what you're saying is spend more, eventually your cost will be less.
Yeah.
That's the paradox. Now, what you have also highlighted is the kind of stuff that you have done in Maruti. I read in your book, sending workers to training in Japan. No, that's really spending money to train.
It's
And
part of the system of how do you convince workers that this system actually works. If I was to tell the worker कि हम ये करेंगे, this is ऐसे बात करते रहते हैं. When they went to Japan and they saw that this was actually happening, they talked to the Japanese workers and the Japanese unions. And those guys told them, this is done because we have all gained out of this. Then they come away convinced कि हाँ ये तो होता है.
ये होता है, कर सकते हैं.
So often, as the saying goes, seeing is believing. So this was part of that exercise. It's not only the workers, by the way, sir. The biggest requirement in this area is your managers. For making managers believe in many of these things, discipline, cleanliness, punctuality, and all of these things. In India, we've got used to the idea that cleanliness, ठीक है, to some extent. Punctuality, what is a few minutes this way, that way? चलता है. They go to Japan
And they see.
and they see that everyone, everywhere, in all walks of life, all, including social activities and everything, punctual to the minute.
But the interesting part is, when we talk about Japan, people say, "Arey, that's Japan. We are Indians." But the point is, you made that happen in India at a time where things were not great in terms of labor relations. So, and that's really fascinating. That when we look at human behavior, right, it is not country dependent. It gets triggered by basic
self-interest,
basic principles,
self-interest.
And you trigger, yes.
My belief is that human behavior is ultimately dependent on self-interest.
Yeah. So how do I ensure? I think you are highlighting two parts. One is that win-win game that you're talking about. The other thing is a lot of hygiene factors that needs to be maintained. And then I see that happening in many companies. For example, you have these factories which are located a little far away. Now, not many companies now create colonies. So you have people who travel close to 1 hour, right? And that's because somebody has optimized on the bus and you need to pack up everybody and that bus goes, in many directions. So what you are ending up doing is that when the worker is coming, he's 1 hour plus on the bus. Let's say on a hot summer day, he's already tired. So when he lands up in the factory, he is not at its best self. So you can expect what can happen there. So taking care of these hygiene factors is also very, very important to ensure that, hey guys, let's make your work life first, get the hygiene factors right in terms of feeling that I'm equal, getting all these things off the table, and then create this wealth creation game. And that's when the magic will happen. I think coming from your mouth is very important because you have seen it. Otherwise, it seems very idealistic. It seems like another socialistic speech. But coming from having seen it and having done it, and to create a wealth for everyone in this game, I think that's really very interesting.
See, these words, socialism and capitalism and all, are much misused words.
I agree.
And I'm not sure what socialism really means. But what I believe we need is how to find a system which maximizes the efficiency of all resources which you have.
Yeah.
And you will find that any system which maximizes that will have a certain element of what you call socialism in it.
Yeah.
You cannot maximize resource utilization, and especially human resource utilization, if you treat a large part of those human resources as people who can be ignored and neglected.
I think that's a fundamental need to feel as equal, because all humans
It
have
won't
this
work.
fundamental
The
need. So
system
you
won't
can't
work.
violate that need. Yeah.
The system won't work. You have to be more equitable. Nobody says that you should divide everything equally. That's absurd.
Yeah.
But-
that doesn't work. Yeah. We have seen it. Those
But
experiments
if
have
you
failed.
want,
Yeah.
no, because somebody has to have the money, somebody has to invest, somebody has to educate himself more, somebody has to work harder, somebody has to have better capacity to take decisions. He'd want some differentiation there, and everybody recognizes that.
Yeah.
The
I read-
worker
yeah.
recognizes that he's not capable of doing everything, which his manager is capable of doing.
I read somewhere, people say that inequality is acceptable, unfairness is not acceptable.
Exactly.
And I think, and you are highlighting that part, that when you are talking about, let's say, that equitable, let's make the system fair.
That's right.
That's the magic
As
word.
fair as one can make it.